Before I get into the presentation, I think maybe I should do just a quick introduction. These stories and presentations are going to be all about your work, but maybe just a little bit of perspective on why am I up here presenting this. So Esri has a group, professional services, and our job is to really support all of you in enabling your capabilities with GIS. And so every year we support around 2,000 users with different kinds of engagements, all aimed at helping you be successful with whatever your mission is, and ultimately enabling your organizations to be as productive and self-sufficient with GIS technology as possible. But at the end of the day, it's about real business or mission results, and that's what I'm going to focus on today. So hope to share some of the things we've learned from witnessing work going on around the world, and we'll spend maybe 45 minutes talking about some things, and then if assuming that I'm on that time, we'll have plenty of time for some questions or discussion, and I'm going to hang out afterwards in the hallway if anyone wants to talk about things offline that you don't want to bring up in front of the audience on the mic and everything. So thank you for coming, and I have this tether, so if you see me fall over, it's because I went too far. I like to walk, so someone can warn me in the front if I'm going to trip. Clearly, if you sat in Monday, how many people were at the plenary on Monday? I'm going to take it as a given. Okay, almost everybody that you saw Monday. And that's the baseline for this conversation. If you didn't, all the videos are now available online. And so even after this, you may want to go back and look at some of those and put this frame of reference behind it. But clearly, there's amazing things. And even as an Esri employee, and I've been at the company for about 17 years now, and it still gives me chills when the lights go down and when we see it all put together. And the stories that we hear, the results that have been obtained, the simplicity of the systems that you see, the amazing business results are really a credit to the organizations who have done them. And also there's some real work in the storytelling about what they've done to make it really clear to all of you. And while that's really impressive, some clients, some users really stand out as setting the bar high. And there were two that were talked about in the plenary that I'm going to highlight a bit today. One is the city of Los Angeles. And you heard Lillian talk about the GeoHub initiative. And the other was Guy Carpenter. And you heard Shannon and Brian speak about their work to launch some of the capabilities for Guy Carpenter. So throughout my presentation, I'm going to come back to examples from the two of them on how they got to where you saw on the main stage. Of course, the plenary had much more than this. I know that you can't read that. I want to give you a sense of something that's been put together. So this is actually an infographic about everything that you saw in the plenary. And as you know, there was all sorts of information, everything from technology about what's coming in different areas, what we have now, and you heard about systems of record and systems of engagement. And in addition to Los Angeles, you heard from New Orleans and Auckland, and you heard from different technology experts at Esri, and you heard about some amazing archaeology, and you saw big data and real-time information. And really, it was, for me, phenomenal, and I hope it was the same for you. And it's also a lot to take in. So you may be listening to all this and saying, how do I calibrate all of that to whatever problem I'm trying to solve? What parts and pieces should I be using? And while the system orchestrated together is elegant and powerful, there are just a few things that you need to be thinking about. So it does take some thought. And that's really what I'm going to be talking about today. How do you do this? How do you actually take all these elements and bring them together in a powerful, elegant way that solves lots of problems, whether they're systems of record, insight, engagement, or all three together? The good news is we are seeing a pattern. We've seen success from users all over the world. We've seen it in every industry. And we've seen it in everything from very small, easy initiatives to some pretty big, heavy things that customers have been doing with the technology. Usually there's a bold vision, there's a big idea, and then there's this sense of getting quick wins. And really it's the latest, greatest technology being deployed in a very focused way to solve real problems. And that's the universal thing we're seeing in all these successful engagements, all these successful users of Esri technology. So the pattern that we're seeing really has two fundamentals. The first is the right conditions, the right mindset in an organization that helps one really have the ingredients for success. And I'll talk about those a little bit. And then the second is the process. And I'm going to do my best not to give you a project management 101 class here, but there are some real details about how organizations go through some methodical steps to realize the results that you've seen in the plenary and you've seen at some of the bright light users around the world. And it doesn't really matter whether you're a heavy, long history GIS organization that's looking to move into the WebGIS pattern and do new things, or whether you're just getting off the ground. We're finding that these patterns are universal. So in terms of conditions for success, I'm going to talk about two things. The first are people. That is the key ingredient to making this all happen, of course. But there's a few key roles that I'd like to highlight. So it's absolutely critical that there's executive leadership and executive sponsor. Who was that for the city of LA? It was the mayor. We heard from him, and he set a vision. You need a champion, someone who at a business level is going to ensure success and drive things forward. And Lillian really embodied that. You can tell that she completely owns the LA GeoHub. And then you need technical leadership. This could be one person, this could be a team of people. It could be multiple organizations working together, and these roles will evolve. And what we see is the technical leadership side of this group really can emerge through the process, the journey of realizing a WebGIS. The other condition for success is a mindset. It's a different way of thinking. The modern technology has completely changed the way that we do things. It's a focus on business outcomes first. I mentioned earlier vision with the idea of quick wins. Organizations that are okay with some uncertainty and can be flexible and adaptable are able to move forward much more quickly. And finally, there's totally different technical paradigms around configuration, and I'll be covering that as we go through. So when you combine those, the people I mentioned, and this kind of a mindset, and continually check on these conditions, you have what we'd like to say is an environment or conditions for success. So what then are the process and the steps? So I actually thought about this quite a bit. There were a lot of Esri consultants from different industries that support different industries at the whiteboard. Wait, what are the 5 fundamental things that we always do? What do we really see in successful programs when people really want to accomplish some significant work? And it really comes down to these 5. And I'm hoping you look at this and you kind of say, duh, you know. It should be pretty basic and understandable. But what I hope to convey as we go through these is a little bit of detail on each of these that is pretty unique to our industry and pretty unique to the technology that's emerged today. So of course, the first thing is a strategy. Without a strategy, you have no reason to be doing anything. And I'm amazed at how many times we wander into situations and we ask, what's the overall strategy? And sometimes people don't know. So you've got to have one and you've got to think it through. If you're going to climb a mountain, everybody has to know about that mountain, and you have to have a big vision. And some people said, don't put that up there. It makes it look like you're climbing K2 to build a GIS. Well, my point is, you need to have a big vision of what you're going to do, however big your mountain is. Or another way to look at it, you're going to put a person on the moon. Okay, everybody needs to understand the mission, and you have something you're trying to do. Everyone needs to work as a team towards the same end, with some sense of a game plan of how you're going to get there, and the ability to react as you go. Big cities take bold visions as well. So of course, Los Angeles had a big vision. And you heard in the mayor's address about his vision. It really comes down to 5 key principles. A safe city, a well-run city that operates efficiently, a livable and sustainable city where people can thrive and grow and raise families and be healthy, a tech community that's vibrant with developers, it's prosperous with economic development. These are fundamentals that the mayor has outlined for the city. And that's wonderful, but how do you start to tie that to the ground? Well, the city worked very diligently to tie those 5 core principles to a bunch of objectives and real-life things that citizens in LA care about, like parking, congestion, energy, emergency response, earthquake preparedness, jobs, homelessness. So these are all really critical issues, and they tie right into the location strategy. So what does it mean to define a location strategy? It's taking that vision and that overall strategy and beginning to put spatial around it. So where does spatial make an impact in the city of LA's vision? What does success look like? Do you know in your own organization what success looks like when you've achieved your vision? What are your priorities? What really matters right now? What is something you can do later? And at this point, it's really important not to be talking about ARC this, or Esri that, or ARC objects here. You're talking about the business. What are you trying to accomplish? And even at Esri, we're victims of this. We'll get in a meeting and we'll start talking about the solution before we've actually described the strategic objectives. So it's really important to keep working at that level. It takes executive engagement, and one of the things that LA did to translate the mayor's vision into the GeoHub was to have a series of executive workshops where they could actually step back and say, all right, which of these issues do we want to tackle first? What are the location assets that really matter for solving the problems of homelessness or of city communication about road work and pavement? Which really leads me to my next step, which is assessing and planning. So this is the LA GeoHub Vision as it began to be sketched out. So this location strategy led to an idea that they would build off the wonderful, rich GIS excellence in all of the different bureaus. And part of this second step is assessing, and there was work done to look at the capabilities in planning, engineering, police, fire, and there was an assessment of which of the bureaus would be ready and interested to start at the early stages. So those 4 were selected as the early adopters. In addition, there was a vision for the public engagement side of this. What could we expose to make citizens, startups, academics, journalists, developers, NGOs, et cetera, have access to great city information to help solve those real problems? So this really created a broad vision and map of how location was going to be put together as we started to work through all of the details. It's not just about technology, and the city realized very quickly it's about people and process. Who are the stakeholders? Who needs to understand what we're talking about here? There were workshops and conversations. There was vision. There were demonstrations. And then there was an understanding as the technology was realized, there's lots of stakeholders that need to be involved and understand it, including the public, including academics and schools and local businesses. So at that stage, they were already thinking about how are we going to educate the community about what we're doing. In 2016, you can't just build technology and then just hope that people will figure out what it is or find it on the web full of everything else that's happening. So there was a real methodical process at LA to think about how are people going to access this? How do we start to make them aware of it? So in the assessing and planning step, it's really important to understand what you have in the organization, what's your existing capability at an IT, at a human level, at a GIS implementation level, and then start to plan what are the first wins you're going to get? What are your anticipated next steps? How are you going to deploy the technology? Clouds, on-premise? We're going to come back to that. But the way that we found it very helpful to organize all these kinds of ideas that you need to think about is to simplify it down into 3 tracks. Business, technical, and organizational. And what we're seeing is if you can think about it in those simple terms, then this sort of mountain of decisions starts to get tracked into things that are more tangible and easily moved through. So I'm going to talk about each track for a moment. So when you're assessing and planning in the business track, you want to be thinking about quick wins. What is something that you can do that will have an immediate impact that has clear success criteria with real users? We're not talking about demos. We're not talking about exercises. It's actually what can we do with real users that will be successful. And because it's a quick win, you want to look for a low-risk, simple technical implementation. So it's this combination of a list of business needs, simple tech that's already ready to go, make it happen, and get something out there in the wild. Then you want to prioritize your next steps, have a sense of where you're going to go from there. And I'll say this later, but I'll give you a preview. You don't want to overplan. You want to have a sense of where you're going, but you're not going to know every detail because you could plan forever. When you turn this into a technology concept, it really is a platform vision that emerges. So this, of course, is an Esri diagram that you often see. I've really exploded the top because there's so many different information products and applications that one can use, and that was the point of my black slide at the beginning, that you need to start thinking about what are the things that you're going to do first. And I'll come back to this in IOC. How are you going to orchestrate this platform? What's your existing architecture that you're building from? Now, one thing that we talk about sometimes, and I'm going to spend more time on it, is this concept of initial operating capability. And so if you look at the ArcGIS system diagram with a little bit more detail, I'm going to spend a few minutes here going through some things. So at the top level, you've all seen the applications. We heard a wonderful, wonderful symphony of apps on Monday. That's where you engage your users, and that's where you're going to be using everything from web maps to story maps to collector to whatever applications and information product configurations are going to work. And there's lots of ways to do that, from the out-of-the-box apps to the solution templates. In addition, there's often great GIS data already in your organization. And so it's a matter of plugging that data into the WebGIS pattern and bringing it to life through the application tier. So we talk about rapid deployment of initial operating capability being that low-hanging fruit on the left side of this diagram. Later on, as you expand the system, you'll start getting into things on the right. I'm just going to give you a sense of it now so you see how it all fits together. So my term for that is realizing an integrated enterprise system. In other words, exploding this thing all over the place and making it work for lots of users and connecting to other business systems. So I've got that little graphic on the right. That could be SAP, or it could be any other business system that you've got information in that you want to sync up to the GIS. Sometimes people are advancing workflows, extending applications to have more specialized user interfaces and workflows. And in systems of record, sometimes there's some pretty significant overhauls to modernize systems of record onto the very latest technology. So those are the kinds of things that you want to think about second. You want to start on the left with the simpler things that you can get a quick win with. So let's take a moment and talk about information products, because this is where the rubber meets the road. And there's a lot of confusion about this topic. So you have business requirements and you have technology. So is Collector for ArcGIS an information product? Well, the answer is no. It's a technology. It's only useful when it's been configured with certain maps in it and a certain workflow and the certain things that you want to do to edit information. Is a story map an information product? No, not until you've put content in it and told your story. So information products are the thing that makes this whole system work, and it's what we've been talking about since Roger Tomlinson introduced the concept many, many, many years ago. It's still completely relevant, even though the tech has changed underneath it. So I think this diagram is useful when you're doing the business of planning and tying your business requirements to technology work. You never want to lose sight of that overlap and what the key information products are. Shifting to deployment, this is more powerful than ever and maybe a little bit more complicated than ever because there's so many options. So I know many of you are thinking through, do I want to put my technology on premise? Do I want to put it in the public cloud? Maybe I want Esri to host it for me and manage services. Maybe I'm just going to use ArcGIS Online. The truth is that most people are using a hybrid approach now, so you're doing a little bit of many of these options. And I want to tell you that you need to think about it ahead, and you need to be okay that it can evolve. We're seeing a lot of people do things like, I need to do this initial operating capability, and I'm going to use the cloud to get that up and running while I harden my IT and do some procurement for an on-premise deployment later, or any other variable in that. So it's in motion all the time. But if you don't think about this at the beginning, then you can be a little bit stuck later on when you say, how am I going to get all this technology scaled up so that I can have 100,000 people on it? At an organizational level, and I'm going to pause, it's very, very easy to be thinking at a business level and thinking at a technology level and not talking at an organizational level. It comes back to the people. So at this stage, you should really be understanding your existing human capital. Who should be involved? What's their background? Have they ever used GIS before? How do they need to be involved? Who are your stakeholders? How do you bring them into the conversation? What kind of development do you need to do in your workforce to have them ready to do this? And maybe this is the most important point to me. Who is your rock star? Who are your technology leaders who are getting it, who have energy and drive and want to be that GIS hero that turns an interesting idea into magic? And you saw some of those folks on stage on Monday. How do you make them successful? How do you give them the support and the room and the empowerment and the flexibility and the adaptability to go make the magic happen? A couple key questions at a human level. Who's really going to use it? Who is your target? Don't build tech just to build tech. I mean, it's fun. I could do that all day. But who's actually going to use it? What are the stakeholders? Who are they? How should they be involved? What do you need to do to rope them in? And what outcomes really matter to get executive buy-in? What does success look like for other people that care? Make sure you understand different people's perspective on this so that you have a winning strategy of what you're going to do and when. So I want to share with you an artifact from the LA GeoHub work. So these are their tracks. Now they chose to divide it into 4 tracks: business, technical, training, and outreach. And I don't really care 3 versus 4. You get the idea. I put organizational as the last 2. So you won't be able to read every word up there potentially, and that's not the point, although I will share some of it with you. So at a business level, they planned activities to brief executives, which were the department heads from police and fire. So does the police chief know what's going on with GIS? Is he aware of what's happening with the LA GeoHub? Maybe it's important that he knows. Maybe you don't want to surprise some of these key people as this stuff rolls out. There was a location value assessment. That's a workshop experience where people are getting on the whiteboard and looking at information products and business priorities and figuring out what should happen first. There were information products defined through that. At a technical level, there's lots of stuff that you can all probably imagine, everything from system architecture to understanding. So think about this. The Bureau of Engineering servers that had been serving the system of record inside the department were about to publish data to thousands of people on the open web. What did that need to look like? Did they need another server in the cloud that they replicated to, et cetera? All that work had to be done. Design and configuring of the applications, and I'll come back to their priorities. There was a training path and an outreach path. The training was about LA staff, and the outreach was about the community that was going to become aware of the capability being unleashed. I want to pause for a second at the end of Assess and Plan, because we need to step back at times. And back in the office in Redlands, I get to talk to people much smarter than me every day about what they're doing in the GIS world. But I tend to ask some very elemental questions, and this is one of them. What are you working on? Or is this a system of engagement that you were talking about? Is this a system of record? Is this some deep analytics that you're putting together for insight? Is it all of them? What's your real focus? So as you're planning and assessing, thinking about your priorities, really think through, well, the real focus I need to have right now is a system of engagement, but I need to tune up my system of record so that it can spit out the data that I need. I don't know what the answer is, but you need to be thinking about these fundamentals. And so I actually struggled. Should I put this in the technical track or the business track or the No, it's sort of all of it. So think of this broadly. And my friend Chris, you may know him, Capelli, put this diagram together, and when I saw it, I said, you've got to see this because it really brings it home. GIS brings all 3 together, but you need to know how you're using each strand. I'd like to offer a few other tips and advice, and for this I've got a guest speaker, but it's virtual. He's not coming up. Let me play it.
Hi, my name is Eric Apple. I'm a practice manager here at Esri, supporting our local government clients from around the world. I've also been fortunate to work with the City of Los Angeles on their GeoHub initiative. I'd like to share with you 2 points that I think are critical to LA's success. The first is that within the organization, there's an awareness and understanding at the executive level of the value of location and the importance it plays in meeting their goals and initiatives. Second, I'd like to point out that they've extended their capabilities past their GIS professionals to a large and broad range of people across the organization. This includes their Chief Data Officer, Chief Innovation Officer, Data Scientist, and many others within many different departments and areas. This has allowed them to maintain, create their momentum.
Thanks to Eric, and he's actually standing in the back. So if you want to talk to him afterwards, he's right there. So I could have had you come up, Eric, but this is faster than getting you mic'd. Okay. I love this image. So I talked earlier about conditions for success, and we've talked about planning. This guy clearly has a sense of where he's headed, and he's clearly up for an adventure. And he really embodies some of those conditions that I talked about. He's willing to be flexible and adaptable, but he knows where he's going in general terms. He's got a spirit, he's got energy, he's going to make something happen. And my main point for you here is that as you've been planning and assessing, you can't do that forever. You got to get going. You got to get out on the trail and start heading for your destination. So don't fall into that trap of analysis paralysis. Get a sketch, work on the fundamentals that I mentioned, and then get going. And I also stole this from Chris. I need to give him credit for this one as well. It's a really great graphic. So, talking about getting something done. Let's get something done. Initial operating capability is what is the technical term for a quick win, something that's real. So what did LA do? Well, they launched with initial operating capability. And as they thought about what's essential for initial operating capability, they thought about a few things. Number one, this was going to be a public engagement capability. And so they knew that the user interface needed to be delightful. They knew that it needed to represent the LA brand, and they knew that it needed to draw people in and get them to want to do more. So they spent a lot of time thinking about that website and what the experience would be, and I think it was time well spent. Of course, to support that, they needed to create the plumbing and infrastructure. So if I start from the bottom, again, we looked carefully at all the servers, and we made sure that they were ready to publish all the services and do it in a way that would be responsive and powerful and let out the information they wanted to put in the public and not let out the information they didn't want to put in the public. And all those came together in a portal for the city staff. So if you saw the demo, right on this top of that web page, it says, "Are you a city employee?" And if a city employee stumbles on the top level, they can get access one level below inside the internal portal that has even more access and more self-service mapping for all the employees of the city. Ultimately, they wanted to publish a rich set of information at their initial launch, which was almost 400 layers from multiple departments. But publishing layers wasn't enough. While those are open web services with APIs and all the powerful things you can do, they knew that people who might access those, like the developer community and the academic community, wouldn't necessarily know what to do with those, and they might think about it like Open Data 1.0, which is a simple download. They wanted to empower people and show that you could solve real problems. So they went and established 3 key applications that solve mayor's problems, and you saw those on Monday. Streetwise, which helped people understand what was going on any given street with information from many bureaus coming together. Vision Zero, about reducing traffic accidents with bikes and pedestrians, and the road pavement, Road to 2400. In addition, they created a curated policy map gallery that combined layers to answer policy questions. So for LA, this was the minimum ship in software terms for their launch. This was a bigger initial operating capability than many people need to do, but they needed to come out with a bang. And they were very clear on what was going to be critical for success. And they were also very clear that they wanted to create a buzz around this. So there was a really great press conference and live stream where Mayor Garcetti and Jack unveiled what had been built and generated some real buzz. And I can tell you that the usage of the services and the use of those apps has just gone straight up since that day. It's been really impressive. At a technology level, initial operating capability, I'm just going to come back to the basics again. It's about figuring out what are the real users who will solve real problems with targeted information products. So you can imagine a whole ecosystem of capability. You could dream all day and write all over the whiteboard. What are the 2 applications that you're going to launch right now that's going to make somebody successful and make somebody look good? What services do you need to put? How do you need to configure your portal or ArcGIS Online to organize it? It's about configuration. As you all know at this point, you can do a lot of things right out of the box. You don't need to do a bunch of custom code to make this happen. Configuring the apps, portal, and services. Initial operating capability at a business level, again, is about solving real business problems that will demonstrate real value of the GIS. It needs to be done quickly, and it can be used to create awareness inside the organization and with the external stakeholders. Technically, you want to be thinking about a really appealing first step. You want people to love the first thing that you do so that they're excited to see more. Again, focus on configuration because that gives you a low technical risk and a quick path to success. And you're thinking about, you're laying down the foundation for the WebGIS. So you've got, sometimes you're implementing Portal for the first time, and you're organizing users, you're getting groups together, and you're getting the services hardened that will power everything else that you do. So the plumbing isn't the sexy part, but it's got to happen behind the scenes. Of course, organizationally, and you saw this about LA, you need to celebrate the results and share them and get people excited. Increase the capability as you do it so more and more technical people are understanding how to do it. And Esri's philosophy when we partner with clients like Los Angeles is to always be increasing their capability. So we're working to teach people to fish, not do the fishing. We want organizations to come away with self-service capability to do this and grow it. So I've got another guest speaker here to give you a few more tips.
Hi, I'm Matt Marino, and I manage a program that focuses on helping our customers achieve IOC. The best advice I can offer you is to never lose sight of how you define success during your location strategy. IOCs come in all shapes and sizes, and every year we see customers achieve it in anywhere from a few days to a few months. Some require large enterprise systems. Some just require a few key information products enabled in ArcGIS Online. All of them determined the minimum size IOC to meet their success criteria, then went out and achieved it.
All right, thanks, Matt. I think that's really good advice. Matt's a humble guy, but he watches WebGIS go up all over the planet, and so he's seen lots of the best things, and he is giving some sessions on IOC. I think he has one more tomorrow. Is that right, Jaron? Do you have the time? No? Okay. We'll get it, and we'll tell you by the end. He also is giving talks in the platform enablement area, so if you want to hear from Matt about how people are doing this. So I talked earlier, we saw the gentleman hiking towards the city. IOC is a great start, and I'll tell you one thing that I see. If I see anybody struggling with this new pattern, it's actually right here. So people get to IOC and they stop. So what was the business vision? What were we trying to accomplish? Well, if you're climbing, well, let's see, I use the 49ers, I use the astronaut. Let's use the astronaut. It doesn't really work very well to get to the launch pad, blast off, and then forget to engage the next engine and keep going. So it's really critical that you step back and say, where are we going? When we were planning, we had a plan. We had some other things we were going to do. Let's keep the momentum going. Let's go forward. So operate and expand. Let's take it to the next level. What did Los Angeles do? Well, you actually heard about this on Monday. They took the LA GeoHub and they applied it when another problem came up. So there was some discussion in Los Angeles, you could say some media coverage about sanitation and trash in alleys and some concerns about are all neighborhoods being served the same way and responsiveness of sanitation. And the city was able to very, very quickly configure a new application based on the GeoHub's capabilities, so a new information product that told the stories about where things had been cleaned, where things weren't clean, and gave citizens the ability to interact with the city on this front. And the mayor actually did a press conference on it very quickly after and had another quick win showing how they can be responsive and hear the citizens' demand and respond to the media's comments about sanitation. They also had departments lining up to join the party. So I mentioned earlier that several departments were handpicked, and I'll be completely honest, there were several departments early on that didn't get it or just were too busy to participate. And that's not negative, it's just human nature. And so the early adopters got involved and they published the GeoHub. And guess what? Everyone saw it and said, wait a minute, this is really interesting. I think there's a lot of value here, not just for my department, but for everybody else in the city too. So all the other bureaus and departments within LA are now plugging into the GeoHub and adding the applications and information products that they think are important and contributing to the discussion at a higher level for the city. So if you look at this in a technology pattern, we're still solving problems for real users with targeted information products, but we're doing more configuration, more apps, additional services. And at times we're doing platform extension. So earlier I showed a more detailed diagram with a left side and a right side. Platform extension is about integrating into other business systems. It's about more custom workflows. You might be doing some focused applications that have more of a custom user interface. So you're really extending the platform to customize needs and adding more configured simple applications and information products. Matt is here. Matt, what time is your talk? 1:30, 15B tomorrow. So IOC with Matt. So from Matt's IOC world to platform extension, you're really expanding the footprint. But I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the first word in this, operations. So if you built an IOC, is it okay to be completely focused on the next thing? No. Because remember, IOC was for real users solving real problems. So the technologists who are running and operating the GIS need to make sure that that is performing well and that users continue to have a delightful experience in accessing the system. So there's a little bit of this is good, let's harden that. Let's add a button there. Okay, now let's work on these new things over here. And so you've got to keep the whole thing going. But what we're finding is because people are configuring and not writing big custom systems, it's a lot easier to keep all that stuff operating. It just works because you're using the same tech as thousands of other users. Okay, so some additional things to think about operating and expanding. So at a business level, continue to demonstrate value. Never lose sight of the real users. Don't get off on GIS technology hobbies that don't have a real user, that don't tie back to your strategic goals. Expand the impact. I don't mean expand the tech, I mean expand the impact. You should be getting more business results, more business value, or more mission value if you're in the public sector. Technically, you need to continue to operate and improve the initial operating capability and look at places where you can add capability and harden the technology. That means check the performance of your servers. Do you need to add a server there? Do you need to increase bandwidth there? Where are you getting the real hits on the system? What needs to scale differently? Do you need to add more security? All those things that you need to think about in an IT world, you need to keep thinking about here. And organizationally, right, the forgotten thing. You got to keep increasing your executive support. So in many cases, at this point, you're moving into new areas of the business. So if you're a private company, you might have started in, say, the real estate group, looking at properties for your commercial business, and the next step, you're getting over to campus security, who are looking at safety and security of employees. And guess what? There's an executive over there that you need to get to know and share this whole vision with. And that means reaching additional teams and people across the organization. Internally, deepening the technical capability. So the other nice thing about this pattern is you don't have to go send people to school for 6 years to come out as the deepest experts in the world. They're learning as they go. As you expand the business value, you're also expanding the technical capability of your organization. And by now, that rock star identified earlier is leading a big team, right? They're empowering the whole world, or however you make people successful. One additional thing about your organization and your people. There is a notion that just send people to academic training and then they turn. No. The modern way to do this is to think about your strategy and then have a workforce development plan. So your strategy and your business objectives should be informing the paths that you put people through. And then they come together around a successful implementation. So your workforce are getting trained in exactly what it is you're trying to roll out, and they're learning as they go. I mean, you've all probably had a situation where you get trained or someone gets trained on some piece of technology, and then it's 18 months before they touch it, and then they have to go get trained. So we're actually tuning the two things together here. This is a very popular way to think, and Monday we announced that we're making a lot of our online courses available at no cost, and that will help you have workforce development plans that you can bring in just the right tech to match your business strategy. So one more guest speaker.
My name is Christy Pleiss. I lead a program that helps hundreds of organizations create and execute a vision for ArcGIS. I have 3 things I want to share with you today. When identifying the champion in your organization to move your vision forward, make sure that they have bandwidth and enthusiasm to do the job. Next, invest in your people. Enable and train them to keep them engaged and grow their careers so that they can be more effective. Finally, even if you are well down the road of technical implementation, it's never too late to consider your business needs.
Thanks to Christy. I don't know if she's here. She is here. Christy's in the back. If you want to talk to Christy afterwards. Just an observation here. So I've had 3 little vignettes from some of the experts, and every stripe that we highlighted from their talk, I'm going to say no stripe that we highlighted from their talk was technical. You notice that? It was all about business, strategy, people, buy-in. Okay. So we're on to the last step. Measure and revisit strategy. Oh, isn't that the same thing as operate and expand? Aren't you just doing more of the same? Kinda, but I'm gonna explain the difference here in a second. But let's talk about Los Angeles. So, as you saw, LA has been growing. They added the sanitation example, and they continue to add. They're up to over 500 or 600 layers of services now, and they continue to expand, and users are making their own information products. So that's all great. That's part of that operate and expand. But there was a new strategic issue for the city, So the city is grappling with some zoning and planning issues. So there was a plan that was approved previously for Hollywood, which if you don't know is actually a part of Los Angeles. It's a bureau in LA district. And that plan was rejected by the courts. And so LA suddenly had a problem. That master plan was thrown out, implying that the whole city needed to be replanned. So there were lots of headlines in the news. And the mayor took bold steps and said, we're going to attack this head on, and we're going to overhaul our planning process. And guess what? GIS was right there to help them solve that problem. So later in the plenary yesterday, you saw Brooks Patrick do a bunch of 3D magic. And if you didn't notice, the place he started was in Hollywood. Why? Because LA is working on that. We've been working with them on how they could use geoplanning and 3D visualization to solve these problems. So what's different here is that the strategy evolved. So maybe it wasn't a decision to step back and revisit the strategy that I'm suggesting, but something came up. It expanded the strategy and the issues that the business or the city was facing, and then they launched into a new effort. So going back to some of the metaphors, in other words, the mayor decided they needed to add another mountain to their climbing tick list. And so they're moving forward with using GIS, data from the GeoHub, and new 3D visualization technology to do urban planning and share those plans with the public and move forward. So what does it really mean to measure and revisit your strategy? So are you actually meeting your business objectives? Remember at the beginning, you actually talked about what does success look like at a business or mission level? How are you doing against that? What's the most important thing to focus on as a business next? Maybe you want to keep going in the same direction you're going, and you want to put all your energy and just continually make that better. Maybe there's a whole new strategic imperative that you'd like to focus on. Maybe it's a little bit of each. So it's a little bit blurry between continuing to expand the footprint and taking a new strategic look, but that's really the difference. You step back and say, wait a minute, what's the destination, and has that changed? Or do I need to add another destination? Technically, as you measure, what are you measuring? Well, user feedback. Things like system performance. How are your servers performing? What's really important is, as you've been rolling things out, COTS technology is always evolving. And the great thing about being in a configuration environment is you can continually take advantage of that. So what's come out from Esri in the last 12 months that you could take advantage? Oh, there's this new workforce thing. Great. Why don't we plug that in? GeoEvent Server now handles real-time features streaming at 10 times what it used to. Maybe that now meets the minimum capability for tracking all of the taxis in my city, or whatever your problem is. So understanding the latest COTS technology allows you to harness this great investment in technology that's being done all the time. Organizationally, it's important to step back and take stock of the maturity of your team. What does location awareness look like? What is Brian talking about, location awareness? What across the organization, the non-GIS people, do they get it? Are they seeing the value of spatial technology? Have they learned how to incorporate maps at work in everything that they do across your businesses? Are people lining up to get more applications, information products, and capability? How about the technical team that's in IT or in GIS shops that are making the magic happen? Do they have what they need? Are they maturing? Do they have the leadership? Do they have the servers and technology that they need to power it? What's your workforce development plan to answer those needs? And if you don't step back, you probably are still getting a lot of value, but it's a really healthy thing to do on a regular basis. So that's a quick summary of the 5 steps. I hope that it's valuable, but I think it would be maybe valuable to spend a moment and go through one more example. So very quickly, I'm going to go back through Guy Carpenter, and I'm going to tell you what they did on those 5 steps. But let's revisit who's Guy Carpenter, what's their mission. There was some time spent on Monday explaining the business of reinsurance. So they're the folks that stand behind all the insurance companies. So if you have insurance on your house, Guy Carpenter might be insuring the insurance company. So they're a broker that makes sure that risk is spread out among all the insurance companies so that you can get your house or your car covered if something really bad happens to it. And there's a lot of people with really bad things happening at the same time. Guy Carpenter is about expert people working with data about risk and portfolios, building world-class models and analysis, and putting that all together with technology to serve their clients, which are these insurance companies. So they thought about the problem and they came up with a location strategy. And they decided that they wanted to offer their clients a geographic advantage through content and decision support that had never been available before. There was never a spatial dimension to the analysis of portfolios in this way made available to these types of organizations. They wanted to be world-class with their analytics and modeling capability and be a real industry leader. This is a place for them to differentiate themselves from their competition by offering location services to their clients. And internally, they knew if they built some capability for their users, they would be building a backbone for their own organization. So as they assessed and planned, they determined there were really 6 key business needs. They needed to really have an ability to have a comprehensive overview of portfolios of insurance. And then they needed to start supporting functions like underwriting or accumulation, which is the number of policies in a given area and the assessment of risk by that batch of policies. They needed to better understand and provide information about events and hazards. And they needed to be able to model and predict scenarios and what that would do for people's portfolios of insured clients. So as they planned, they had to assess what they had. And they had a variety of different non-spatial applications, building reports. And they needed to create a vision and an understanding of the roadmap. So for them, because this was going to be focused in a strongly designed application, they built wireframes, and they used that to have an internal conversation about what really mattered at a business level. What features and functions and capabilities did the GIS need to have for those users? So by sketching quickly in wireframes, everybody involved in the process understood exactly what we're talking about. This wasn't a Microsoft Word document describing 155 requirements. No, it was a mock-up that was changing every day in active interchange. They also planned out the ArcGIS backbone. So this was the IT team looking at what's the infrastructure we're going to put behind this, very carefully thinking that through. And then they got going on initial operating capability. And you notice this isn't about technology, this is about business requirements. So they prioritized and said we want to focus on overview of portfolio holdings, and we want to focus on the underwriting problem. Because if we tackle those two, we can bring on initial real users solving real problems. North American focused, keep it in a certain container. Their core business customers, some of their most loyal clients doing the most basic things, supporting underwriting and analysis. And then internally at Guy Carpenter, the brokers could have access, and the catastrophic risk analysts would also have access to it. So they were very clear in what they wanted to get done with the first version of the application. What was their technical vision? Well, even though they were building a very focused app, it was all part of the platform. And this is where the IT team came in and said, oh, this is really cool. I mean, you've got open APIs and reusable widgets. We thought we had to build all this stuff from scratch. Lightweight feature services, concepts like identity and security. They were very excited to be able to just bake all this stuff into it. And you can see that there were key layers of information and services that were going to power this whole thing. So insurance portfolio data, overlaid with catastrophic events in real time. You saw some of that on Monday, fires. What are some of the environmental hazards, historical risks and models that people would, where are the floodplains, where are the, et cetera. At the application tier, they knew the focus was going to be on this Advantage Point application, but they were pretty excited about the configurable APIs that they could potentially provide to their clients, and the fact that they could provide business productivity apps internally and power applications like Pro and Desktop for their deep analysts. Some of those things were set to the future because that's the process of prioritization. So they really focused on Advantage Point, but they laid in the plumbing to do all of this. The business environment at Guy Carpenter was important, and it was really impressive to see how Shannon and her team put this whole thing together. So they built an integrated team to solve the problems and get off the ground. Included Guy Carpenter Business, IT, Esri's help, and third-party developers, all brought together working in an agile Scrum environment to move this forward quickly. Shannon provided business leadership, reaching across the organization to ensure stakeholder alignment, and worked very closely with the steering committee from different parts of the business. Sorry, I went too quick. And all along the way, IT was new to the GIS world, so they were learning about how to deploy GIS, what were the best practices, how do you care and feed for a system like this, and over time taking on more and more of it themselves. They've been implementing things like system monitoring and other smart new technology to help keep track of their systems and make sure they were scaling and performing well. As Guy Carpenter expanded their operations, they kept supporting the current system, and then they moved into 4 or 5 other areas: events, hazards, scenario, accumulation of portfolios, workflows, and combinations and comparisons. And this allowed them to reach a new user base, global, external customers that they've never touched before that weren't already Guy Carpenter customers, and they were able to support a whole variety of new policy types with the application. So they're very deliberate, and they knew that all along they needed to keep using the system, never taking it down, just adding functions, adding capability, and clients with each release. And we use the term release here. It's kind of a soft thing. They were just continually adding functionality, kind of like ArcGIS Online does. You hear about there's new stuff in there. Meanwhile, Shannon was out letting everybody know at the company, this is what's coming. This is when you can tell your clients about it. This is when they can start joining the system and starting to play based on their business requirements. As Guy Carpenter has recognized their achievements to date, they've been stepping back and thinking at a strategic level, what else do they need to do? And they've got a couple things. Number one, they're going to keep adding capability to Advantage Point. There's some more functions and features that they want to do. But they're also seeing there's some sister applications that they can quickly deploy that will add more value to their end users, to their clients. At the same time, they can now envision a location platform for their business, which they've never had before. So they're looking at business efficiency across Guy Carpenter internally, better data management of all their portfolio and other spatial information, and consolidation of multiple systems that can now condense and be much easier to maintain. As you saw on stage, they're starting to look at 3D and new capabilities that will open up new lines of business for them, additional insights for all of their clients. And they're very excited about the potential with analytics, with all the new big data processing power that we talked about on Monday. And they didn't really highlight this, but they're dealing with billions of records at Guy Carpenter. So it's pretty exciting to think what they can start to do with the new big data servers that we were talking about. So all of this is part of their future. And like I mentioned before, their strategy is actually demanding 2 things. They're going to keep moving on the thing that they started, and then they're going to start moving in other directions in parallel. And that's pretty common, what we're seeing. So these are just 2 examples. And maybe you've been successful as well. And it'd be really interesting for you to talk with us and talk with each other about what your pattern has been. But again, it's really 2 things: right conditions and the right process. And those conditions need to keep going all the time. I do want to take a moment and thank Los Angeles and Guy Carpenter for sharing their success with everybody on Monday and allowing us to deep dive into kind of the story behind the story here and what they've done and how they got to this point. And I want to close by helping you imagine, are you the next dot of light? Maybe you already are. Maybe you've figured this out. Maybe you can help us see how this pattern works to everybody's benefit. And I just had a quote I loved in the plenary. I don't know if you caught it. We must get on with the mapping of our world. So that's what this is all about. So I'm excited to see you all move forward, and I wish you all the best success with your journey into WebGIS. And please feel free to ask any of the people here from Esri afterwards if you want to discuss this further. And if there's time, I think there is, I'm happy to take a few questions here as we wrap up. Yes?
Has the city of LA shared with you guys some of the numbers of how many people are accessing the open data?
Yeah, how many hits? So the question is, has the city of Los Angeles shared the number of hits and open data downloads and other access points? I don't know if Eric's still here. Do we have any stats on that, Eric, that you know?
They haven't made it public yet. They are monitoring.
Okay. So Eric's answer is they haven't made it public. They're carefully monitoring it, but I don't know if we can share in this forum. Thank you. But it's been pretty impressive seeing the use. Yeah. Other questions? You're thinking about it?
Well, the challenge we have in this framework is, and I mean, like I say, under all due respect, kind of thing,
Yeah.
is ESRI discussing, introducing, and then fully implementing function. And the challenge we have, and this isn't really a question, but it's the challenge we have, what do we discuss with our executive sponsors, our champions, when we hear that something may be coming out and it really isn't mature for another 2 years.
Right.
I think that's just a challenge.
Sure.
You have this
Yeah, it's a constant evolution, right? Yeah. So the question, the kind of the heart of the question, if I say it right, is as the technology is emerging and you're working with your executive stakeholders, how much do you share? And there's things that aren't quite done, but they're being released, and when do you get into that? And I don't know if there's an easy answer, but one thing I would say is that I think it's important to focus on the business outcomes with the executives. What problems can we solve? And the conversation can be, we could solve this smart bus routing thing right now easily. And this other thing, it might be a bit of a lift, but I know that Esri is coming out with some new solutions. And if we give this one 6 months and prioritize it later, we can solve it much more easily in a much more straightforward, less customized way. So it's sometimes helpful to keep them out of all the tech details if you can. Yeah, just going to go back there.
In both of those cases that you demonstrated, Esri was a big partner, a paid partner in the development. Yet you didn't really discuss how did these customers engage with Esri so that it was a productive and a good relationship.
Yeah.
And who are you interacting with in your projects to ensure success?
That's a great question. So the question is, as in these examples, LA and Guy Carpenter did work closely with Esri. How did we work together? Who did we work with to ensure success, and kind of what was the method? Well, let me go back to the philosophy that I mentioned at the beginning. When Esri is involved partnering with any of our users in these types of initiatives, we're all about, I'll go back to the old, I think maybe it's a Chinese proverb, I'm not sure, teach people to fish, don't do the fishing. And I mentioned that at the beginning. So our pattern was to see wherever we could help Los Angeles and Guy Carpenter get this done. It was a little bit different with each one. So Los Angeles was more of an advisory relationship. And then at a technical level, we were helping them assess as we went from group to group. And we also helped them facilitate the location value assessments, so the discussion about what would we do quickly and what's the information products and those things. So we engaged at all levels. We worked very closely with Lillian, and we worked very closely with the technical staff in each of the bureaus. And we worked with them very hand in hand on the UI design. At Guy Carpenter, we worked closely with the business team on priorities, and then we were very engaged with IT, actually working hand in hand with them on both the programming of the application as well as the IT infrastructure and the hosting and everything that needed to be thought through.
Did you come in as sole source or as response to RFPs in both instances?
Both of those were direct with Esri through our software relationship. Yes, LA was an EEAP technical advisory relationship. Yep. Other questions? Yes?
Make this available, this information available?
Yes, we are going to. I think we're going to slightly change the format and maybe into a white papers and blogs, but we're going to put this information out as a framework that people can follow. So be happy to do that.
So where can you find it?
I'm sorry?
Where can you find it?
I'm not sure. Do we know where we're putting these things yet? In GeoNet. Good answer. GeoNet.
More importantly, do you know when?
I'll get back to talk to me afterwards. I'll get your information. We'll get you what you need. I just have to figure out how, what timing we're putting out all these events, all this stuff. But I will definitely get it to you. So. And GeoNet is a great place to go to find these sorts of things. Any other questions? Or if you feel like talking privately with any of us without the big group, that's fine too. Yes?
Do you offer something along these lines in terms of either like online service kind of course or like a technical kind of consulting, mentoring service at all for organizations that are looking at implementing their WebGIS but
Yes.
fully embraced it yet?
Yeah, two questions. One is, do we have online training at this level? And then second, how do we support clients directly? The first question, I'd say Esri has some work to do, and there's work on multiple fronts to get more information out about adopting a WebGIS at a simpler, higher level above the bits and bytes. So we're working on that very hard. And that's exactly why Jack asked me to give this presentation as well. But we do have a dedicated program for partnering with something called the Enterprise Advantage Program. It was referenced in the last question. And that's a ongoing relationship where we work at a strategic level to plan and match business requirements to technology and then advise on what's coming when and what's maybe the best way. And there's workforce development aspects to it, and they can do cloud hosting through it, and ultimately you can. So that's a support vehicle that we have. It's called the Enterprise Advantage Program. And Christy over there runs the program. So she could tell you a lot more about it. Yep.
Do you have any insight into how
Yeah.
slides.
Yeah.
And so do you have insight into if they created it on their own or whether they went
Sure.
to internal departments or if they went actually to the public?
Yeah.
to solicit feedback?
Well, I can't tell you exactly how the mayor of LA came to that vision, but I can tell you that was a city political, aspirational, big vision, and I'm sure he consulted lots of people to think about how to boil down to the 5 fundamental things that he wants a city. We weren't part of that. That vision was set. The mayor and Jack met, and they talked about that vision, and then the two of them cooked up this vision along with their CIO. Guy Carpenter was a much more deliberate business process about understanding what they could do to add value to their clients. And Shannon and some others in the business side were very involved with, well, what would they, so they want people to stay engaged with Guy Carpenter and continue to use their brokerage services. So they wanted to offer these applications as an added benefit to the people's relationship with Guy Carpenter. So there was a very deliberate business analysis and business case about that. And as they've gone on this journey, the reason that the first steps and second steps were so clear is because they knew exactly what their business case was to draw in more value to their end clients.